Sherman today to talk about AI-driven AI governance or embedding AI in the AI governance process. Eli, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
For sure. My name is Eli Sherman, as Lucas mentioned. I come to Credo AI from an academic background. Did a PhD in computer science, focusing on causality. When can we make causal claims from data? And that's a relatively risk-minded academic subfield, and so it dovetails nicely with our work at Credo AI at figuring out how to govern the use and development of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Super necessary here. I'm so glad that we have you working on this really tough, almost paradoxical problem. So we have this great thing called AI that's here to increase efficiency and speed things up and automate. And then we have this new practice on top of AI called AI governance, which is about laying the AI guardrails so that you can drive faster ultimately with AI. But it's been interesting. I work with a lot of our customers in customer marketing, seeing almost a little bit of an aversion to just kind of moving fast and breaking things when it comes to bringing AI into AI governance, or almost like a fox in the henhouse situation, right? You can't have AI as the cop and the entity being policed. And unfortunately, AI governance also is an area that really needs automation and speed and efficiency in order to be adopted. So it's kind of a catch-22. So I'm so glad that we have your brilliant mind on the job. So when it comes to bringing in AI to govern AI, how do you prioritize the areas of governance even to start with? You know, with intake and data ingestion and all these potentially onerous tasks that need human oversight, is it about like a risk, hierarchy, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to something you said a little bit before, which is sort of the why. Why is AI a part? Why does the AI need to be a part of the governance process? And I think that's a question of scale, right? So organizations that are thinking about risk management, thinking about policy compliance, right now they're getting inundated with requests from their employees to say, here's this new tool. Can I use this tool for whatever task in my job? And the sheer number of the requests, the sheer amount of information is just burdening large organizations. And so when you think about bringing AI into that process, it is an efficiency gain, and so it needs to meet organizations at the point where they're experiencing the most pain, right? And so we think about that as sort of this intake and the start of review as a really prime area to think about what are the parts that we can automate and what are the parts that still need that human eye, that human input to judge the proposed AI system, right?
Yeah, I love that it's about scale. It's kind of ironic because people have an aversion to AI in AI governance because of the fox in the hen house assumption, but AI governance is like the epitome of where you need AI. It's an onerous practice with all of these parts, and you can automate subcomponents, but you don't have to just turn it over to AI. You can have the oversight, the governor or the custodian of AI, we sometimes say. So yeah, I would argue that there's kind of this the misunderstanding of AI for AI governance when actually we should all be really excited about your work and in you bringing it in to our platform.
Totally. Yeah. It's I think like really leaning into this idea of efficiency and not so much the idea that you're taking away judgment from humans, right? We're moving from, you know, take this intake process idea as an example. Often that's some employee wants to use a tool. The risk managers at an organization, their job is to balance efficiency gains and sort of not getting in the way of their organization while also mitigating what we call tail risk, right? Those big, you end up on the front page of a major newspaper sort of events, or you have a data leakage or something like that. And so intake is really about this idea of like collecting information and then making a decision based on, what the risk is implied by that information. And so, that final decision, and we hear this all the time from our customers and those that we survey in the market, that decision still needs to be, a human at the end of the day. But a lot of the work of bringing in that information, trying to understand what it's saying, that is something that can be augmented, supported, automated, depending on your comfort level, by an AI system. Modern AI systems are really good at that sort of information translation and transformation problem.
Yeah, totally. I love that. Just because our AI can identify the risk, that doesn't mean the human isn't involved. It actually is more efficiently surfacing it to them so that the human can prioritize
Mm-hmm.
the decision making. And there's kind of all of, that's why you've got to bring AI governance in-house, because there's this special layer of knowledge, like a generic LLM won't know your company and your industry like you do. There's always that kind of, there just can be, I can't think of a good example right now, but, in manufacturing and people that like kind of work their way up and have seen like the factory floor, they know what's dangerous. And AI might not prioritize the risks as good as the human being, it's
Totally.
just, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you think about like ChatGPT, right? You're using ChatGPT to assess the risk of something. ChatGPT doesn't know your organization's risk tolerance. It doesn't know the things that you're worried about, um, and that context ends up being really important for assessing risk. And also, it's just a general system, right? It's a really useful system. The models that underlie ChatGPT are really useful as general purpose models for maybe adapting into a governance workflow. But if you're just, your employee sent you some documents saying, I want to use this, I don't know, transcription tool, and then you're pasting that into ChatGPT, you're probably going to leave out key information, that needs to be part of that process, right? And so systematizing how you bring that information into the AI system, and then systematizing how that flows into reviews and then risk identification, mitigation identification. That's really important, right? And so OpenAI and Anthropic are not putting in the thought to how you do that process, right, for governance.
And that's a critical asterisk. I'm so glad you brought that up. We're not condoning AI for AI governance, meaning post it into ChatGPT and get your plan. We're talking about building it into the Credo AI platform, the best in class AI governance platform that has a lot else going on to make sure that AI is working for you in the right way.
Yeah.
So, Eli, I would love to get your reaction on kind of the topics of the moment. Something I heard recently in the jobs conversation, and it was someone pretty high up involved in kind of the labor market, sort of on the political side of, AI potentially taking jobs. Um, this person said that AI replaces tasks, not jobs, and that was kind of a mind-blowing statement for me. Is that how you're looking at bringing an AI into AI governance, in a field where, enterprises are just hiring for some of these positions for the first time? Is it like tasks or jobs that you think about when you're imagining the jobs to be done that the AI, will do?
So I think it's definitely true that it's about tasks, at least right now. Uh, the reality is that it's really hard to replace judgment, and judgment needs to be in the hands of the organization. So there are tasks that an AI system can support with, right? Automating the collection of information, automating, checking that information against some sort of rubric. But ultimately, decision making still needs to be a human. And if you're fully automating your governance process, right? Collection, review, decision making, ongoing monitoring, chances are you're going to get a mess. You're going to end up like, if you don't have a governance persona in your organization, and it just becomes a side project of somebody at the C-suite level, or somebody who is managing product, or has some other remit, that person's mind is not going to be on this task, right? And they're going to hand off probably too much of that judgment, right, to a system that isn't yet validated, right? That isn't yet able to take on a full job role.
Um, yeah, that's fascinating, and I love having these conversations with you for the first time. You know what I mean? Like it's truly mind blowing because I haven't heard you like explain it in that way, and it's I the future's in good hands if you're the one bringing AI into AI governance. Um, So speaking of, okay, like AI is not ready to take over the jobs of AI governance. It is still task-based for now. I think about something that Andre Karpathy said recently on the Dwarkesh podcast that kind of broke the internet in our little corner of the internet, which is that it's not the year of agents, it's the decade of agents. And to me, that's such a sigh of relief because I see people building so fast in AI that the cart's a little bit before the horse. And when you have the cart before the horse, you actually can't go fast. You can't go anywhere, And so everybody's having this kind of like, come to moment. So, I want to talk about the order of operations in bringing in governance. Is it critical to bring it in, like ideally in an ideal world, before a company even adopts AI, or like how long along the AI journey is too far where it's inconvenient to bring in governance now,
I,
given that
I
context
I
is
think
wrong.
it's naive to assume that your company isn't adopting AI. Is
Mm,
actually where I would cut in there, right? There are some organizations, very risk averse organizations. Imagine the CIA. I can't speak for the CIA, but I would guess that they are much more reticent to adopt AI than a publicly traded, company, and they have the mechanisms to shut down AI use. But by and large, for-profit companies, if they're not already specifically shutting it down and taking heavy duty steps to do that, then the AI is happening at their organization. And so then it becomes a matter of identifying that. So things like shadow AI discovery, and then doing something about it, right? It doesn't mean that all AI use is bad. A lot of AI use is going to empower your employees, and we're seeing this sort of grassroots adoption is sort of the more effective way to get productivity gains than having some sort of top-down mandate like thou shalt use AI. Uh, and so the question of like when to bring in governance and when to think about having governance roles and having processes, that time is now. I do think that like there is a different sort of answer in thinking depending on if you're a 200,000 person organization versus a 10-person startup. But even that 10-person startup is thinking about risk, even if it's not explicit, right? They're thinking about how do I evaluate to make sure that this is doing well? How do I think about security and privacy? Not necessarily because I'm worried about ending up on the front page of a major newspaper, but maybe because my customers are asking me. And so we're seeing this demand for governance to be industry wide, right? It's an ecosystem thing. And that means that the thinking about it, starting to think about it, is a yesterday problem, right? If you haven't started thinking about it and started thinking about what risk management looks like for your organization, you're already behind.
completely agreed. And I just thought of actually kind of a function there where we think of shadow AI as just this thing that had to exist and it's always going to be a problem. But if you brought in governance before AI, and the earlier you bring in governance, the less shadow AI you'll have to deal with, because your employees know which tools to use, which tools are approved, and like which tools already have the, to avoid duplicate effort. That's actually a big like efficiency that governance is unlocking. We're seeing from some of our customers that I talked to is that there were all these use cases that are actually the same, and all of the approvals are already done, or like
Yeah.
the evidence already collected. But if you're doing the 10 identical use cases on these 10 different models, it's 10 times the risk for no reward.
Yeah.
Um, I love that relationship between shadow AI and the timing at which you kind of start governance.
Yeah, I think this is a key insight is that governance is not about being a fuddy-duddy. Oftentimes it's
Define fuddy
seen
duddy.
fuddy-duddy, a grouch, a curmudgeon, right?
Okay.
You're not there even as much as rank and file employees at an organization might perceive governance as the cop, right? As the person that's there to rain on your parade. Governance is really about control, right? And it's about making sure that the organization's best interests are respected. And in some cases, that's saying, well, we have to use encryption and multi-factor authentication and all the sort of stuff that we hear from cybersecurity land, and sort of the new things that we're seeing related to mitigating hallucinations, for instance. Um, and it also means empowering, right? If you hear that your employees are all using the free ChatGPT just on the internet because they don't know that there's some organizational account where not only do you get sort of that control, cybersecurity control, but there's also features that benefit the users, right? That are explicitly built for teams. That sort of thing is what governance is there to empower, right? It's not just about saying like thou shalt not. It's also about empowering and building this synergistic use within an organization, and both of those need to fall under the remit of a governance regime.
Um, Completely agreed. I mean, we hate to say like I told you so, but this kind of inability to recoup AI ROI or not seeing it, or like, it's the decade of agents. You built the agents too fast; they don't work, or they don't actually have the scope that kind of like the AI companies were saying. Um, Governance can be such an enabler, you know, because the oversight allows you even that deduplicating the efforts example I shared. I think that, I mean, I love our customers and I see them as such strategic, like pro AI people. And I think like the future is bright, for AI governance people. I think the word governance might have, inherited, it brings along with it all this baggage of saying no and blocking. But we haven't figured out how to unlock and unblock AI in the right way. And it's
Mhm.
definitely not the fast and loose way. Because if in 10 years, when the decade of agents is over, and an enterprise has agents doing everything and no governance, that company is going to go under. There's so
Yeah,
many things that will go wrong with that.
yeah.
So luckily we have time.
Yeah, I don't know, I come back to like education as being a pretty critical piece right now. It's part of, again, the I think the governance remit. But we at Credo AI, we just did our like annual cybersecurity training, right? The like don't click on phishing emails. Everybody in a corporate role in America goes through something like this probably once a year, right? And I think large enterprises, especially because there's so much diffusion, so much there are diversity of usages, and the ratio of like oversight to rank and file people is way imbalanced. That you need to think about ways to empower your employees to use AI effectively, right? And so it's not. I mean, part of that is in the same way as the phishing training. It's the like, don't paste this type of information into your AI system. That totally needs to be part of the educational piece, and there needs to be the you know sort of grassroots sharing. It can be informed by grassroots sharing of, hey, I tried this out with Claude Code the other day, and it didn't work so well. I tried this other thing out with Claude Code, and it worked great, and that's going to save an hour a week for me. And that sort of information sharing, and then starting to put that into onboarding materials and annual training, and that's sort of like the continuous rewards type stuff that a head of people would be in charge of. That needs to be part of this governance story, right? Governance is not about just risk mitigation. It's about control and making sure that you're controlling the growth of your organization.
Totally. And the grassroots sharing is going to maximize returns from AI. And where else would that live but governance? I mean, like AI literacy is in the EU AI Act, you know? And so why not have the governance teams literally teaching people how to use AI more, but the right way?
Yeah.
Um, Okay, wow. I love talking to you because I want to keep it on topic with, AI-driven AI governance. But in general, actually, it is all one topic, which is that this is about making governance the enabler
Hmm.
because it can't enable if it's too slow that it actually does slow down, getting AI projects to production. And so I guess I'll end on a question for you. If we can get if for any user or a viewer who doesn't know the jobs to be done in AI governance in a platform, where does AI come in that you've seen like it saves the most time? Where something used to take a ton of time and now AI can do it really well. And can you kind of explain that how it sort of the magic even like looks like, functionally, where you've seen and you've brought it in and you're like, wow, that's a wow moment.
So the I think the thing that we're focusing on, and this is part of our product roadmap, and we're worried about sort of the enterpriseification of this, but we know that it works um, uh, based on prototyping. Is this idea of intake, right? So you have a lot of documentation about the AI uses, and take a given use of AI. There's a lot of documentation out there, but you might not be aware of it, or it might not be centralized, right? So if you're building an AI system, there's probably documents in your Google Docs or Drive or Box. There's probably a lot of information in your ML ops tooling, and etc. And similarly, if you're thinking about procuring something, there's a lot of information out there from the vendor. And it might not be necessarily in one place. It might be spread among contracts and product pages and that sort of thing. And our intake flows, think about it as like it's information collection. I'm filling out a questionnaire that by the end of that, I should understand the risk of the system. And it is so painful for a human to fill that out because it means you're manually going and collecting all that information, trying to command F, look for some keyword term, and then paste that in to, because your governance persona is asking for this. And that doesn't need to be the way it works, right? We have seen that if you prompt correctly, do the sort of right context management, um, you can collect that information in a mostly automated way, and you can transform or translate that information into the format that a reviewer needs to see. And then subsequently, you can support the reviewer by saying, we didn't have a lot of information about this, and maybe that actually means you need to go back to the vendor, right? Maybe that means that information isn't out there, and this is sort of a red flag risk. But otherwise, we could say if somebody's not filling out something substantially, they're being lazy, we can flag that for a reviewer. And so hitting both sides of this, like information intake and review, I think we're going to see pretty big time savings very soon.
That's such a cool area. And I can see how that would get onerous. And, it would be tragic if AI projects are delayed and not getting the green light just because they're on step 8 out of 10 of the intake, but their mind is numbed and they can't do anymore.
Yeah.
So love to have you, bringing your brilliance and levity into this really complex task, that I think we've discovered today is actually not a fox in the henhouse situation. It's the ultimate use case for AI, and where governance people should be really excited that we're very selectively bringing it in. Again, not condoning pasting what you're doing with AI into ChatGPT and asking for, to automate kind of the risk process. So thank you so much for joining, Eli. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and see you next time. Credo AI Trust Talks.
Thank you
Bye
for
bye.
having me, Lucas.